Hey fiddlers, welcome to today's fiddle video. Today we're going to be talking about how to simplify and complexify a tune. Complexify is totally a word. It definitely is. One thing I love about fiddling is how you can learn a tune as a beginner that you can still enjoy playing years down the road when you're a much more seasoned fiddler. And what this means is you can be in a jam where there's a beginner fiddler playing along with a professional fiddler, and they can both be challenging themselves just enough because they can play a simpler version of the tune or a more complex fancy-dancy version. That's the technical term, fancy-dancy. So today I'm going to walk you through a few ways that you can both simplify a tune, just make it a little bit more straightforward, and also add some complexities and make it a little bit more intricate. We're going to be focusing on a tune called Bastringue. It's a traditional French-Canadian reel, and if you'd like to learn how to play it, I did make a tutorial for that and you'll find a link in the description. Here's a sort of basic version of the tune. All right, so that's what we're working with. Let's start out with the first category in which you might simplify or complexify matters with this tune, and that is NOTEY-NESS. Here's what I mean by that. Whether you're playing a jig or a reel or a waltz, tunes have differing degrees to which they subdivide the beat. So some tunes, for example, some reels might be a lot of quarter notes and not a lot of those quick eighth notes. So they're a little less notey. There are honestly just fewer notes in the tune. Other ones might just be non-stop eighth notes all the time, 24/7. So I might call those a little more notey. It tends to be a little easier to play tunes if they're less notey, if they're just a little less busy than if they have gazillions of eighth notes just coming at you nonstop. So to simplify a tune, you might just take out some notes. And when you're leaving notes out, you want to choose what are the most important notes? What are the crucial notes that really make up the melody of this tune, the melodic arc of this tune? People's opinions might differ on that, but very often you might look for what are the notes that are on the downbeat of the tune? What are the notes that are on my foot tap if I'm tapping my foot? So for example, the first phrase of the tune goes like this. And here are the notes that are on the downbeat in that phrase. So it's a little boring if we take out all of the notes that are not on the downbeat, but we could leave in a few of them and still simplify the melody a bit. Maybe we could go like this. And that actually sounds kind of nice. And we could do that for the rest of the A part as well. So finding the notes that are on the downbeat and just holding on to those a little longer and leaving out some of the extra stuff. That's not really the classic version of the tune, but it'll work if you're in a session playing along with other people. So that's one way to make the tune a little less notey, just to elongate those downbeat notes a little bit and leave in enough of the other stuff just to make it still sound like the melody. Another thing to look for is, are there parts of the tune where you're going back and forth between a melodic note and sort of a drone note, a note that's sort of a background note underneath the melody? Here's what I mean by that. In the B part of Bastringue, for example, we have this happening. So let's take the first phrase of that. What you're doing is you're going back and forth between this D note and melodic notes on the E string. So you keep coming back to that third finger on the A string, that D note. But it's almost in the background. The real melodic line is going. In the next phrase, the sort of continuous note changes to a C natural. And again, you might think of the melodic line as still starting on that C natural because it's on the downbeat, and then going to the E string notes. So if we take out those sort of background notes for the whole B part, here's how that will sound. And one more way that you could take out some notes is look for places where there's a note that's connecting to other notes and just remove that little connective note. For example, there's this little part of the tune. And in this little chunk of notes, the main thing that's happening is you're getting from this G to this E by way of that F sharp. But you could take that F sharp out, it would still sound fine. Again, it just takes out a little bit of the busyness, so your left hand doesn't have to rush around quite as much. You could also take out pickup notes, so notes that lead into the downbeat. At the end of the first half of the B part, so before we start the second half of the B part, there's just a little open string pickup note, so it goes like this. You could leave out that pickup note and just start right in on. Okay, so here's that very simplified B part. And that's perfectly serviceable. All right, let's say we wanted to go the opposite direction. We wanted to complexify the tune, so we want to make it more notey. Some tunes in their sort of core form are pretty notey already, so it's hard to add much to them. But in La Bastringue, we do have a fair number of quarter notes in the A part, and those are mildly longer notes that we can subdivide into shorter notes, into eighth notes. So for example, in the first phrase of the tune, we have quarter, eighth notes, quarter, eighth notes, quarter, quarter, half note. So we could just stick with the normal melody, and then when we get to these quarter notes, instead of, we could go, or, there are all kinds of options. You can just kind of experiment with dancing around those E string notes until you find something that sounds good. Again, I kind of like to follow the melodic line of the tune, not go too far afield. In some fiddling traditions, you might want to do that. Some fiddlers might be more prone to doing that, but I like to pretty much stick closer to the melody. The next phrase has a whole bunch of quarter notes, and they're kind of walking up from that C sharp to the E, so that's the basic shape of it. We could go like this, and then land on the beginning of the next phrase. Here's a very notey rendition of that A part where I'm basically following the melodic line, but subdividing the quarter notes into eighth notes and sort of dancing around the melody a little bit. Another thing we can do is we could add in those string crossings going back and forth from the melody to a background note. The B part already has that, but we could add it to the A part. For example, in the part of the tune where it goes, we could use the open A as a background note and go like this. Lastly, we talked about taking out connective notes, but you could also add in connective notes. In the B part where you have there's this little skip from this quarter note to your first finger on the E. You could connect those two notes with an E in between. Same thing here. here's what we've got. So let's try that for the whole B part. Okay, so adjusting the notiness of the tune is one of the main ways that you can make it simpler or more complex. But I did want to throw a few other things your way before you go. One of those things is the rhythmic complexity of the tune. In general, I'd say that reels and jigs don't tend to get too rhythmically complex, so there's often not a whole lot to simplify there. But if you want to complexify a tune, changing up the rhythm is one way you can do it. For example, you could choose a bow pattern and just try to stick with it for a little bit in the tune to make it kind of interesting. La Bastringue starts out with this long, short, long, short sort of pattern, and you can just keep that up for a little bit. Another thing you can do is anticipating the beat, so you can start the downbeat note that will happen at the beginning of the next measure. You can start it a little earlier. Another thing you can do is change up the emphasis in a tune. When you're keeping things simple, you might want to really emphasize the downbeat of the tune, so where you might tap your foot. If you want to make it a little fancier though, you could try emphasizing the offbeat, so kind of in between your foot taps. Or switching that up, going from downbeat to offbeat here and there. Another element of complexity is double stops. So obviously if you're playing a tune more simply, you might leave out double stops altogether, or just play an open string below the melody if that sounds nice. Those might be some simple double stops, just playing the A below the melody when you're playing on the E string, and the D below the melody when you're playing on the A string. But you can leave them out altogether. That's probably the simplest approach. To make it more complex, you could add in a whole bunch of double stops, and maybe not just the open strings. You could also add in some fancy chords here and there. And then of course there's ornamentation. So if you're playing a tune more simply, you can leave out ornamentation altogether, or you might add in whatever's easiest for you to do. Often slides are one of the easier ornaments to throw in there. And if you're going a little fancier, you can add in ornamentation all over the place. Alright fiddlers, that does it for today's video. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope it helps you just challenge yourself to the extent that makes sense for you in your fiddling. Again, if you'd like to learn the basic tune, La Bastringue, I did do a tutorial on that, so you'll find a link for that in the description. Have a wonderful day, happy fiddling, and I'll see you soon.